Juniper by Monica Furlong, Chapter 3. Since the day when she had found me in the stable, Uni had not spoken to me, which I thought was odd behavior for a godmother. Perhaps twice a year I would see her at castle door, marching purposefully through the palace on her way to my father's apartments. I noticed that she would spend hours with him, but then scorned the feasting and the presents with which we regaled most of our visitors, and leave as simply as she came, setting off on the long walk to the mysterious place where she lived in the outland. I had no idea what she and my father could talk about. One day, however, a change came. Aerith entered the room where I was practicing my calligraphy. I remember that I was gilding a letter A that had a tiny blue man sitting sideways on the crossbar and swinging his leg, and said, "King Mark wants to see you, right away." She turned sharply and went out. I sighed. I had been enjoying my work and was annoyed at being interrupted, but no one kept my father waiting. I suppose because that day changed my life, I can still remember the look of the writing, the brilliant autumn sky, and even the gown I wore, blue, with a belt worked in precious stones and silk. My father sat in the great chair that he used when he was meeting people officially. On a smaller chair beside him, very upright, sat Uni, who did not greet or notice me. I sat on an even smaller chair, suddenly feeling insignificant and shy. "We have been talking," said my father, "Uni and I, about your future. As you know, it is the custom of this country to send a noble child away from home, for a year or two, to stay in another house as part of that child's education. It is usually boys who are sent, but in this case the circumstances are unusual. Uni, as your godmother, has proposed that in, say, a year's time, we should send you to live with her for a while. She believes, and I agree with her, that she will have valuable lessons to teach you." The expression on my face must have betrayed my horror at the idea of living with Uni, because my father frowned sternly at me. I had forgotten that however startled I was, he expected me to show good manners. "Go away from here?" I said. "From Aerith and you and Mother and Gamal and everyone? To go and live in the outland? You will come to no harm." I was so upset that I felt my lower lip begin to droop with the threat of tears. Uni spoke, but she was not in the least reassuring. "It is necessary," she said. "There are things you need to learn, things only I can teach you. I am your godmother, and I claim the right to instruct you." "I don't want to go," I said sullenly, half under my breath. "For a year and a day," Uni went on as if I had not spoken. "That should do it. You will come to me in about a year. I shall not send for you. You will know when the moment comes. Come alone, on foot, with a few clothes. That should suffice." "Very well then," said my father. "It's settled." I knew that this was the signal for me to leave, and unwillingly I got up to go. Uni followed me, and when we were outside the door, she turned to me with a rather wolfish smile, hissing through her teeth the one word, "Juniper," almost as if she were making a joke. Then she turned and walked away. I was deeply shaken by this encounter. I discussed it with Aerith, who was indignant at the suggestion that I should go anywhere without her, and I mentioned it to my mother, Erlaine, who was sympathetic but who, predictably, sided with my father. However, she shed a new light on the idea. "We have spoken of the power you may need one day," she said. I think it is too soon to say whether you will have that or should use it, but Uni is one who has power. That is why we chose her for you as a godmother. She is quite right. You could learn from her." This made the whole idea seem a little better, but at the same time I dreaded leaving all the places and people I knew and going to live in the outland. "What is Uni's house like?" I asked sulkily. "I don't know. I've never been there. I've heard that it's beside a great hill, a tor, near the sea, and I think she appoints herself a sort of guardian of the hill." This was comforting in a way. I liked the idea of living by the sea, but I was still puzzled and hurt. "You will send me to the outland to stay at a house you've never seen? The outland is dangerous. Everybody knows that. I might easily be killed by brigands or by our enemies. None of you seems to care. And Uni is so dirty and horrible." Quite apart from the dangers of the outland, I could not understand why my parents trusted Uni so much. I did not like Uni, nor trust her, and I was afraid of her rags and poverty. My mother hesitated. The Christians say that there is no magic, that the world is ruled by love, and I cannot decide whether they are right. Our forebear Arthur was a Christian, yet believed in magic, she said. This kingdom seems to be controlled by magic, good magic and bad magic. For those who choose the good magic, it is important to have strong allies who choose good magic too. Uni is your father's strongest ally. If you let her, she will become your ally, and that may be important. Erlaine said this all very gravely, and though the words she used were simple, it was as if she were talking to a grown-up. Somehow, without really understanding, I knew that I would have to go to be Uni's pupil. I wondered when. Uni had said in about a year, and that I would know when the time came. But I could not imagine how. In any case, a year seemed a comfortably long time away. Autumn slipped into snowy winter, and little seemed to have changed in my life, except one thing. The dream of the hazel tree was coming more and more often. Always I was delighted by its beauty. It filled me with a sort of hunger that was also a kind of joy, the feeling that if I could find it, I would be supremely happy. Occasionally I woke up at this point, and there were tears of happiness on my cheeks. But far more often I was back again in the tunnel, running in terror from the dreadful fate that pursued me and my companions, and which was heralded by the intolerable noise and smell. I told Gamal about the conversation with Uni. He was so fascinated that he went right home and told Marut. Later he said that she was very angry about it. I could not understand why it would make Marut angry, but I was not in the least sorry that it did. I grew a lot in that year, and I felt as if I came to understand many more things. I played the harp every day. I learned and sang many of the famous songs of my people. I studied the stars and learned astrological law. I read Latin and wrote what I believed was a beautiful script. More often my father took me into his council chamber when he was listening to a dispute, and afterward would ask me what I thought of his decision. I usually got bored in the middle of all the explanations, though, and went off into a daydream. I daydreamed a lot at that time. Sometimes I daydreamed that I was a beautiful woman whom everyone adored, sometimes that I was a brave soldier who was afraid of nothing. One day something odd happened, as odd as the day when I had felt the twig move in my hands. It was a bright spring morning, and Gamal and I had run away. in my case from lessons, and in Gamal's from the perpetual wearisome drilling of his life as a boy soldier. We were riding a long way from Castledore in the outland territory, which my father had forbidden to us. We were cantering in a wide grassy space with trees on one side of it. I knew from previous experience that a bit farther the ground rose steeply, passed into a narrow galley by a stream with cliffs on both sides, swung toward a narrow place where you could pass only one at a time, and then opened toward an estuary and the sea. I suppose I was thinking about the place, anticipating it, when suddenly, with total clarity, I saw it in my mind's eye. On the far side of the narrow gorge was a camp with ragged women and children and skinny horses grazing. But in the narrow place between the rocks, several men were crouched, holding weapons, clearly with the intention of killing or holding for ransom anyone who attempted to pass. So vivid was this picture that I had to look around me to make sure that I was not actually at the gorge. No, there was the spacious stretch of grass, the trees, and the lithe movement of our horses beneath us. But there we were, it seemed to me, heading fast toward danger. At once I told myself I was making up a story, and that I must order my thoughts. But then, as if from beside me came a voice, very like the owlish voice in which Gamal imitated Moon. "Don't go, don't go." On that day, as on many others, I was carrying Moon asleep in my pocket. I slowed my horse, and though I knew the owl hated bright daylight, I pulled him out. He fluffed his feathers, blinked crossly, and said again, I could see his beak moving, "Don't go, don't go." "You can talk, Moon," I said. "Of course," he replied wearily, "but now I want to go back to sleep." I shouted to Gamal to stop,